Good evening. My name is Okwe Enwezo. I'm the director of Haus der Kunst. Gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you here this evening for the opening of Frank Bowling, Mappa Mundi. And it's a great honor and privilege as well to have Frank Bowling with us here today. So please join me in welcoming Frank Bowling. If it's possible to give an introduction to the career of Frank Bowling, the little amount of time I have will not be enough to talk about the importance of this artist within the context of modern and contemporary art. But it remains to be said that artists like Frank Bowling are increasingly rare, and that is artists who, during a moment of global transition, a moment when the world, as it were, was an unfixed place, arrived on the artistic scene. Bowling arrived in London from Guyana, British-Guayana, where he was born in 1953. Can I just ask everybody to turn off their phones and at least put it in silence? Thank you. A moment of the structural transformation of the world when both the obituary of the Nazis was being written, but also the obituary of colonial empires. So Bowling emerged as a child of two worlds, or many worlds, who arrived in England when London as a city was being also transformed into a global and cosmopolitan place. So imagine a 19-year-old arriving in this momentous historical period. Not necessarily to make a living, but to make a life. And the life for Bowling was at the center of artistic production, at the center of artistic creation. But there were detours before this arrival. Detours as a writer and as a poet, detours as an emigre in Paris, from which he became disenchanted after understanding that maybe his métier was not going to be as a writer, but something else. And that something else was the visual arts, to which Bowling came, not unnaturally, but in many ways it was not a prescribed destination. So after service in the Royal Air Force in England for 2.5 years and entering the Royal College of Art to study, Bowling was part of that generation of artists in the early 1960s who began to redefine contemporary art within the city. And this new generation, David Hockney, who was a classmate of his, Derek Boshier, Ron Kitai, and amongst many others, were critical figures. But because Bowling was also somebody who was constantly traveling, but traveling imaginatively, there came a moment when that cosmopolitan London became too small. He needed a bigger space, a bigger canvas, and the destination pointed to New York. New York in 1966, or the United States in 1966, was also a country in transition. The turmoil and the chaos of Vietnam, of civil rights politics, of the struggle for visibility amongst the segregated, the disadvantaged, and of course, at the very center of it, the force of artists to not only to create a space of imagination, but to build one through the practice of art. These were all the things that excited Bowling, and this transition was also the break, the crucial break or shift in his work, because I think there is a lot of continuity, as Bowling said in a 1969 film, Upstairs, trying to link his early work from the 60s with the later work he made in the late 60s. But this shift was formal in many ways, but it was also conceptual. Conceptual in the sense that the rectangle of the canvas was not sufficient to register the imprint or the location of the terrain of possibility that Bowling was trying to carve out within the space of painting. And this was the occasion for the shift from figuration to abstraction. And this is where our exhibition begins. Our exhibition begins by looking at this 50-year trajectory from 1967 up until the present moment, where Bowling was shuttling back and forth between different worlds, between the world of painting, the space of the artist as a critical figure in the creation of the space of imagination, and of course, the location of his own studio as a practitioner. I did say when I started that I cannot give an account of Bowling's career in a very short period of time. But what I just simply want to say is what a historical figure that Bowling was, and that is here with us today. But also he was a witness to all the changes. So it was not work produced from a distance. And that structural, semantic, critical, and material dislocation of the figure in the abstract work ended up registering as a sign of the Black Atlantic world, the map of South America. Not merely the figure of the map, but a location, a place, that terrain of the possible. And these were the ideas that Bowling began with in 1967, and that you will find in the first 3 chapters of the exhibition. The exhibition is organized not strictly chronological. It's organized around an axis of chronology and the episodic. And that will give you a sense of discovery, the sense of endless struggle to domesticate and discipline painting, but Bowling always fails and starts again. So, thank you so much, Frank, for okay, some basic housekeeping. I would like to also use the opportunity to acknowledge and welcome a number of people who have been very, very important and central to the development of this exhibition, especially Rachel Scott, Bowling's wife, and also they met in Royal College of Art in 1959, so a long time ago. And so she too is not only a witness, but also the chronicler, if you will, of Bowling's, career. So thank you so much, Rachel, for really giving us access to many things. But before I mention other people, I would like to use the opportunity to welcome Anna Schneider, my co-curator. Of course, I stand here as a director giving the opening speech, but Anna did all the work. So thank you so much, Anna. It's been such a wonderful project amongst many projects that we've done together. So thank you. I would like to also acknowledge our collaborators, institutional collaborators, who will be welcoming this exhibition in their respective institutions, beginning with the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Dublin. I believe there's Sarah Glennie and Rachel, director, and Rachel Thomas, senior curator and head of exhibitions from IMA are here. Please welcome Sarah and Rachel. After Dublin, the exhibition will also travel to Sharjah Art Foundation in Sharjah, United Arab Emirates. And I would like to use the opportunity to acknowledge Hor Al-Qasimi, the president and director of Sharjah Art Foundation, and Judith Greer, director of international programs, whom I believe is also here. Please welcome. I mean, of course, artists not only make work, but they need, supporters and cheerleaders, especially galleries. And it's been really a great source of pleasure to work with the staff at Hales Gallery, who not only made it possible to organize the access to many of the works that we have in the exhibition, but who also generously supported the exhibition. So thank you, Paul Hedge, Paul Maslin, Stuart Morris, Charlie, and there are many people. So thank you, Hales Gallery. I should also use the opportunity to welcome Mark Selwyn from Mark Selwyn Gallery in LA, who also represents the work of Frank Bowling. If Mark is here, welcome, Mark. Among many other people, Rose Jones, who is a photographer and a filmmaker who started off as a neighbor of Frank Bowling's in Peacock Yard in London, and has over the years become a person who protects. Shall I say, Rose, that you overprotect the archive? Everything has a watermark, in the lowest quality. Yeah, but Rose Jones, again, has been really very, very instrumental in the exhibition, and we thank her very much. Thank you, Rose. There are a number of people here, and because I met Frank Bowling nearly 25 years ago, and as with many things, we enter the world of artists through introductions, and I'm especially pleased that Spencer Richards is here. Spencer also played a central role. I'm still waiting for the video of the interview that I did with Frank in 1995 that you somehow lost. But that shows you how far back this goes. Thank you, Spencer. And Victor Davson, the founder of Algira Center of Contemporary Art in Newark, New Jersey, and Carl Hazelwood, who is not here. We are all instrumental in helping me see the importance of engaging with Bowling's work. So, welcome. I call them the Guyanese mafia. So many people to thank: our publishers at Prestel, especially the editor-in-chief, Katerina Hadara, and her colleagues at Prestel. The catalog is here, and available in our bookshop in both English and German. So after the exhibition, please do make your way to the bookshop. And I would like to use the opportunity to thank our installation team and the entire staff of Haus der Kunst for their committed work. And I think it goes without saying that when an exhibition looks good, it should look effortless. And the installers at Haus der Kunst always perform the effortless. So thank you all. Yeah. And also our supporters, the Freistaat Bayern, Free State of Bavaria, the Gesellschaft der Freunde Haus der Kunst, and our major supporter, the Alexander Tuchek Foundation. I would like to acknowledge them for their annual support of our programs. Accompanying the Bowling exhibition are going to be a series of ongoing events. One starts for tomorrow, which is a walk through the exhibition between myself, Anna Schneider, and Ghislaine Tawadros, curator and writer, and again, a very knowledgeable scholar on the work of Frank Bowling. So please join us tomorrow at 6 p.m. or 6:30 p.m. for the walk through the exhibition to gain deeper insight into the particular work of specific works in the exhibition. And on October 20 this year, we will hold a one-day symposium The Sea is History, Art, and Black Atlantic Cultures, a symposium around the work of Frank Bowling with very significant speakers, Sonia Boyce, J. Michael Dash, Paul Gilroy, Ellen Gallagher, Isaac Julian, Steve McQueen, Courtney J. Martin, John Comfort, and so on. So this will be really a fantastic opportunity to really enter into the world of Frank Bowling. And I would like to use the opportunity to acknowledge the support, the funding of the exhibition by International Curators Forum in London, without whom we will not have gotten this off the ground. I believe that David A. Bailey is here, and welcome, David. And so, thank you so much. I'm going to now sit down and have a very brief conversation with Frank Bowling. I promise to be short, but you know how these things go. Your enthusiasm takes over. So thank you. So Frank.
Yes, sir.
I read in your biography that you visited Munich in the late 50s.
Yes.
What brought you to Munich? Why Munich?
The motivation was that I stumbled across expressionist art, and it seemed that Munich was one of the places that if one was trying to be an artist, you had to visit. And my first year at the Royal College of Art, I came as a student and stayed in the Catholic hostel. And the Arte Panactic was a sort of wealth of stimulus for somebody like myself with an ambition to sort of express in painting, in making things, that expressed the one's own feelings about the world around one. And I discovered that, this was Munich, the Arte Panactic was the place that I found that I could learn most from, plus the Baureiter that came later on. And off I went with the evidence before me of people trying to make works with paint, the pictures that had this sort of feeling of a clarity in the troubled, confused, discombobulated world that they found themselves in.
I wonder, because this was also a very important moment for Haus der Kunst as an institution. As an institution in transition, it had moved from being Haus der Deutschen Kunst to Haus der Kunst hosting all these different exhibitions.
Yeah.
Did you come to Haus der Kunst during your visit? Did you make any attempt to visit this building?
No, I knew of it, but I think that I concentrated on the
old art.
The old part, yes.
Yeah. So, and I just want to, because I know that these references, the Blauer Reiter, the German Expressionism, were formative.
In my own work.
Yeah, influences in your own work and references. But in addition to that, you also went to Holland.
Yes, I did, because, I was to discover later on also the influence on the terrain of Guyana, where I was born, British-Guayana. It was influenced by the Dutch
because Dutch Guyana was next, next door.
But it was not just that. Guyana is surrounded by water. I mean, I suppose deep down is still into South America, but it almost always seems to hang on the edge of South America. And land always surrounded by water. There's drainage and irrigation, and the Dutch were the champions, the ones who really knew how to drain land and reclaim land. And the evidence of their structures, engineering and geometrical structures that are listed all over the terrain in Guyana, as a child you don't notice these things, but as a sort of aspiring artist, you sort of suddenly, I had my thesis, as you know, forced upon me about Mondrian, and I found that very stiff because, as far as I was concerned, Dutch painting was de Hoogh, Vermeer, Rembrandt, particularly because of Rembrandt's soulful sort of portraiture and, the work he did. I thought I was being punished for being sort of obvious, aggressive, and hell-bent on being among the best. And being among the best was, I wanted to be the best as an artist, a young artist. And I was given Mondrian as a thesis, and I found that one of the things that I feel very strongly about is about being punished. My whole life, from till child, being punished, like you're naughty, and then you're to the extent that people thought you become crazy because you just won't accept nonsense. And I thought it was a very subtle way of punishing me for being slightly different in my interpretation of the subject matter in the Royal College of Art at the time. Subject matter was important. What you were being taught is about subject matter, and if you had an amazing subject matter and you strove to get the right disciplines in order to express subject matter, then you were up and away. Well, my subject matter was birth and sort of, death and stuff. Because I saw, Swan giving up on the River Thames and a young West Indian girl trying to deliver her own child. And you can't, for geometrical abstraction to be introduced or imposed upon me, I thought that, I was being punished, right? So I took it on, and though, like most of these things, you're not ahead of your teachers, I went on a scholarship to British-Guayana and discovered that the terrain was structured for the reasons that the land was surrounded by water, drainage, and control of the land. Led straight to Mondrian's geometrical work, and I haven't sort of gotten off on that kind of rigid structural stuff that you can't get light without color. So color and structure, my work is still involved in. And that was because the Royal College decided that I should do my thesis on Mondrian.
And did you?
I did, yeah. I wrote my thesis, yeah. I mean, I was what they used to call a scholarship boy, and you had to shine.
Yeah.
So, you knuckle down, and I wrote an essay which has come back as one of the better essays during the time of my, my generation at the college.
I will come back to this, but it strikes me very much that even though you felt you were being punished by Mondrian, that there is still that kind of geometric unconscious somehow lurking in your work, especially with South America Squared.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's no question that I had a sense of it, but birth and death and sinning and stuff like that was more urgently needed to be, to me, to be expressed, because the thesis, the major task, as it was called at the time, was the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, birthday, But for me, birthday began, the moment you were born. And I happened on this alarming sort of spectacle of a young woman trying to deliver her own baby. And, I didn't have a painting, so I had to make a painting out of this alarming experience.
Unfortunately, we don't have these works in the exhibition. You will have to wait 2 years' time for Frank's retrospective at Tate Britain to be able to see, these works. But Frank, I just want to sort of talk about.
What's here?
Yeah. London.
Yeah, London. Yeah.
London, okay. the Royal College of Art.
Yeah.
What your habits of looking were like in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
And what role did these, the emergent artistic forms, played in your development?
Yeah. Well, I was lucky in the sense that during my national service, I met an architect and painter called Keith Critchlow, who took me up because I was in a lot of trouble. I was always getting into trouble, as many of us who did the national service were, because the rules were made on the foot. The basic discipline was all right, but when you get a kind of neurotic corporal from Scotland trying to discipline fellows from East London or Somerset or wherever, and they're bullies, and it was a rough old time, national service. And he rescued me in the sense of pointing me to, and there I was introduced to art and culture. When I left as a teenager, when I left British-Guayana as a teenager, I was aware of things like writing, which, you can't control people unless you can control their minds, right? You have to drill them in the language. And a Guyanese are very literary people, they're very, in the Caribbean on the whole, I think, literature is very amazing storytelling, which belongs to everybody in the world, right? And sort of life is being explained through song and dance and writing and theater and stuff, but nobody knew about painting, sculpture. So I had a lingering sort of thoughts about writing, and I've even though I know that writing is not my specific number, I aspire to, when I try and write, to make the writing make sense and to tell the truth. So every now and then I still go on writing, but as soon as I saw the pictures in the National Gallery, which is where, because we were stationed in Kent, you had to come into Waterloo, and then, Trafalgar Square and right across the road there is the National Gallery. And without fail, Keith would take me to the National Gallery or the Tate, a neighborhood in Victoria, where the trains go also. And the Tate Gallery became sort of my home. I was in and out of the Tate Gallery, and I still live around the corner. So that was my beginning, that the kind of painting that I was introduced to, the kind of art, the Arcadia, and then classical sort of works by Titian and other sort of important artists. I aspired to do. I wanted to make.
It's always Titian, Rembrandt.
Yeah, I wanted to be like the best.
Yeah.
So, and I still feel that way.
Yeah. Of course. Royal College of Art was very, very important. Not only for you, but for an entire generation of artists. There. You met David Hockney.
Oh, yeah.
Was a classmate of yours, Ron Kitai.
Yeah.
And talk about what it was like dealing with subject matter in Royal College of Art.
Yeah, well, it's the way it was. That subject matter was what the instructors insisted was where great cultural expression, painting, sculpture, writing, whatever, came from. If you didn't, subject matter was the emphasis. Of course, tangentially, one was introduced to techniques, but nobody was actually there teaching you how to sort of use the brush. Or drawing, of course, was important. It insisted that you needed to be able to draw the figure. But art and painting was about subjects. Subject matter was the thing. So most of the artists, Dave Hockney, Kitai, Derek Bosher, Pete Blake was a little older than us, so he was around. Richard Hamilton, people like that, began to make waves about subject matter. Wasn't simply about making landscape or domestic scene, sort of on Sunday lunch or something like that. It was also about advertising. It was also about glamour. And that caused incredible confusion because...
So this was the moment of pop.
Yeah, right. So girly magazines were around and, people playing guitars or, pop music was the thing. But I found that the subject matter for me was these alarming experiences like, births and people dying and giving birth. So when the Four Horsemen as the subject came on, I saw it as a parable for the struggle that I knew was going on in a place like British-Guayana, because the racial situation there, where the Indians and the Africans, sort of before them, struggling to shake off the shackles of slavery and the, as we used to call them, East Indians who came from India, subcontinent, as indentured laborers. There was tension, and there were the sort of overseers, the white people, who were trying to dominate and suppress the people there, keep them in their place. It was a sort of conflict between these various ethnic types. And my Four Horsemen, I tried to make the works to reflect that, this racial conflict, which I find continually boring. And, it doesn't do much for my life. And, I think even though the great books tell us that it's there, they also try to encourage us to feel that you don't have to have that. You can aspire to peace and sort of happiness. The length of your lifetime could be from birth to death, a completion of a cycle of joy and happiness and achievement. So there are all these things. Even though you get alarming situations like the flood and the fire next time. It's only, to my mind, they're warning you about that. It doesn't have to happen. You can have a lot of fun in your life and love each other without, sort of like saying, well, blue eyes and pale skin is the top. This kind of thing. And brown and black, stay back. I resented that because I didn't think it was all to do with me. I wanted something else. And so my work during that time tried to reflect, the really wretched things. I thought that, tragedy was what you should hold up as what's is not necessary. My work was attempting to hold up the things that made one feel good. So
What was this for you? So when you moved to New York and shifted to abstraction,
yes.
and it was abstraction a way to give up these?
The obviousness of life and death,
Yeah.
I mean, here I found that there were other things that you could actually sort of reveal through the, one of the first things that I experienced when I got to New York was these talks about the subject of the artist. And since I was trained in a regime of subject matter, the subject of the artist never occurred to us. And the subject of the artist is the material you work with and how well you can make the material reveal how you feel about everything and anything. And New York was there because those reasons that, I discovered it was not subject matter, the subject of the artist. If you can make the paint dance and alarm and express rage without screaming heads and people hanging and stuff, that was the way to go.
Yeah. Well, I think that one of the things that is very obvious when one enters into the exhibition is there's still this incredible intensity in the abstract work.
Yes.
But there's also incredible visual pleasure in looking at the work. So this tension between the very muted or the rage, rendered sotto voce, and the fact that these are paintings or works that are meant to be looked at. Yes, especially in the introductory part of the exhibition, as you enter into the staircase with middle passage.
Yes,
because I think that middle passage encapsulates this tension between rage and visual pleasure to make the painting dance. Talk about your relationship with color and the ways in which you use color to register emotional depth.
Yes, well, I mean, having discovered that the subject of the artist was the material that we're using, I mean, you have this rectangle, flat rectangle, that you have to, and the stuff you're using, color, paint, and the carrier, being the canvas or the board or whatever you're working on. The material has to deliver the feelings that you felt were necessary for a picture, right? The thing on the wall, you look at it. And I mean, I didn't know during the time that my work was being celebrated, just at the end of my student time and just after. And it was pointed out, on moments when during the student years, one found that the English or the British had this internal conflict between provincial and city and town and country, and Scottish and Irish and Welsh and English, and it was maddening. So that coming from what eventually became known as the Commonwealth, I found an awful lot of people who also were white, who felt the same kind of pressures from provincial English people from Leeds or Edinburgh or from Wales or from wherever, and, South London. So we formed ourselves in a group called the Young Commonwealth Artists that was really a kind of a mixture of, Oriental people from the Far East, people from the Near East, people from Africa, people, from all over the place. And we formed this group because we felt the pressure of the kind of internal conflict that the English were involved with, subject matter. That almost all the best painters there were into, sort of some Scottish argument about, who was the best at doing what. And we formed our own group because in those days it was the Young Contemporaries, which is a postgraduate exhibition of all the sort of student artists in a main exhibition in London. And almost without exception, in my memory, the Young Contemporaries didn't feature in any sense of the equivalent of the people's talents. The Commonwealth artists, they were always being elbowed out of the way, and we worked on committees, and it was like we were being tolerated. So we formed the Young Commonwealth Artists, and the year, I suppose, was '62, when the Young Commonwealth Artists exhibition in the same venue that the Young Contemporaries was by far the best student exhibition that London has seen in years. Yeah. So we were, featured and lauded.
Yeah, I know that David Sylvester wrote a very complimentary review of a group of artists, the Baconians, for whom Bacon served as an acolyte. But I just want to get back to New York and color, intensity, rage, pleasure, and all of that.
I was lucky in that.
Your relocation to New York really changed the language of your work.
It did, yes.
And this is really at the very center of the exhibition that you will see, very shortly.
Yes, it was revealed to me, and I was doing the work because, that freedom, that marvelous drive that the Americans seem to adopt of newness and, being in the new world, the penny dropped for me that, here it was. You didn't have to be able to draw like Anne or you named Dura, or, you didn't have to be able to do that. You could sort of make the paint deliver the sort of feelings that you were sort of entirely sort of souped into, and that freed me because somehow when I arrived in New York, color field painting was emerging, and I accidentally found myself involved in color field painting because during my student years and the kinds of lectures and stuff we were exposed to about the color, color being, the sort of energy in Western painting and stuff, I found that letting the color flow, let it bleed, like gathering in pools and stuff like that, made me feel I got satisfaction out of just letting the material, the subject of the artist, free. And one can never forget the kind of rigid discipline that you have to go through, learning to walk, learning to run, this kind of, you don't give those out. So always the work had to jive with the discipline of organizing that rectangle that you're trying to express yourself on. So there was always geometry and color in the work, and I just ran for it.
And a very central, part of the exhibition is devoted to the map paintings.
Yes.
Can you discuss their development and how that happened?
Well, as I was leaving London, I was in a rage for one specific moment over the top, I think, now. My work, our work, the work of the young artists in London started to, even though it's fragmented, there were people from Australia and New Zealand and people from the Far East also in the mix. It seemed suddenly that the whole business of subject matter didn't seem to, it wasn't that urgent, right? You could play with it if you like. And I left London already trying to use color in a lavish way in my work. And when I got to New York, the first memorable image that I can remember, can I recall, was I pouring the paint on an area of canvas that had the one thing that I felt that I should hang on to was a bowling variety store, my mother's establishment in New Amsterdam. That image, because of its sort of what it meant to me, and also the way this architecture had coalesced all over the then British-Guayana. It was a sort of special architecture that is influenced by the subcontinent people, Indians, and you go to the countryside and you see the way the Indians have decorated their temples and Muslims, let's say, and all the flags and stuff. It had a kind of a structure that you read in terms of visual dynamics, right? So I hung on to that, but the flooding of the color, one of the things that I was still conscious about was about how the French were always at the British in the New World, and de Gaulle was beating a drum for, French Canada, and there were caricaturists making things about de Gaulle's nose. And I found that the stain that emerged on the piece of canvas I was working on the floor, and trying to follow the light coming in the window, using the light, red through green, this kind of thing, reading it in terms of, the basic geometry of color. There's an area appeared like a caricature that I'd seen about de Gaulle's nose. And that's what turned into South America. Literally, that's how it worked. The Gaulle's nose suddenly became South American with his cap and stuff, and I went from there.
Well, I think we can really go even deeper, but I think
you have to look at it, I really can't talk about it in the sense of any graphic sort of development, but there was this caricature of de Gaulle that everyone in the English-speaking world knew about. That he was putting his nose into the New World, so claiming the New World for France as opposed to be British, and it was a joke.
So it was a very happy accident.
A happy accident for me, yeah.
That then multiplied into more.
More than, I realized that on the atlas, that South America and Africa looked as though it could be one whole shape at one point, but then they shared apart, and one went this way and the other one went that way. And that drift, that continental drift, if you like, galvanized my sort of intention of the material gathering in pools and shifting and spread and bleed, all these terms that people don't know about nowadays. But color field painting had all these sort of very factual sort of terms for stuff, like, the paint was, stuff. It was spread and bleeding and gathering in pools and settling into shapes that sort of reminded one of, land masses and, the sea and water all around, this kind of thing. It was an adventurous time for me, and I ended up by trying to do all the map shapes across from Africa to Australia, that sort of thing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Frank Bowling.